Well, he's nobody's fool, so he's playing it cool as can be. He'll give it a whirl.
Hello again, everyone. This is Steve Kallas, speaking of sports, and we're here to talk about what's going on in the world of sports with respect to the shooting of Mr. Blake in Kenosha, Wisconsin. And a lot's gone on, but I'm going to bring in my special guest, Coach Dwayne Murray. Coach is he's a basketball coach at Mount Vernon High School. He runs the Mount Vernon feeder program. Back in 2011, he was an assistant coach at the McDonald's All-American game. Hopefully you guys know what that means. And finally, he is the associate head coach of the New York Renaissance U17 team. So he's got quite a resume. Welcome, Coach. It's good to have you here.
Thanks. Thank you.
What I want to do is start off reading, and I hope you people saw the Doc Rivers post-game press conference Tuesday night. We're taping this the day before the 57th anniversary of Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech, so it's frankly sad but fitting that we're doing this at this time. But Doc Rivers Tuesday night after the Clippers victory was very interesting. He was wearing a vote mask, and to say the following, he took off his mask. I think he wanted to be crystal clear on what he was about to say. As you know, Mr. Blake was shot in the back 7 times. You've probably seen the video by now. There's been a lot of protests since then, but I'm going to let Dwayne Murray talk about that. But here's the quote from Tuesday night from Doc Rivers, the coach of the Clippers, who, of course, I think you know is African-American, but he's also the son of a police officer. His father was a cop.
What stands out to me is just watching the Republican convention, and they're spewing this fear, right? Like, all you hear is Donald Trump and all of them talking about fear. We're the ones getting killed. We're the ones getting shot. We're the ones that we're denied to live in certain communities. We've been hung, we've been shot, and all you do is keep hearing about fear. It's amazing to me why we keep loving this country, and this country does not love us back. And it's really so sad. Like, I should just be a coach. And it's so often reminded of my color. You know, it's just really sad. We got to do better. But we got to demand better. Like, it's funny. We protest, and they send riot guards, right? They send people in riot outfits. They go to Michigan with guns, and they're spitting on cops, and nothing happens. The training has to change in the police force. The unions have to be taken down in the police force. My dad was a cop. I believe in good cops. We're not trying to defund the police and take all their money away. We're trying to get them to protect us, just like they protect everybody else. I didn't want to talk about it before the game because it's so hard, like, to just keep watching it. That video, if you watch that video, you don't need to be black to be outraged. You need to be American and outraged. And how dare the Republicans talk about fear? We're the ones that need to be scared. We're the ones having to talk to every black child. What white father has to give his son a talk about being careful if you get pulled over? It's just ridiculous. And it just keeps going. There's no charges. Breonna Taylor, no charges, nothing. All we're asking is you live up to the Constitution. That's all we're asking for everybody, for everyone. Thank you.
So Coach Murray, give me your thoughts on that, and then just the big picture. I haven't discussed all the games missed, but you can certainly do that. But what are your thoughts and feelings? You know the lay of the land. You're a longtime basketball coach. You're African American as well. So give us your thoughts. What do you think about the whole thing?
I don't recall a time when someone has put those words together as eloquently as he has. There was a big impact, especially when you look at social media and you look at in the news reports afterwards on the words he said, especially those last words regarding that we're loving America, but America's not loving us back. It was impactful. I know it was for me. I had to see it over and over again because it really hit home. And I know from looking at social media, it hit home to a lot of people. So, and I know subsequently Chris Webber has said some things which was really heartfelt or whatever, but it was something about Coach Rivers' words that I just don't recall. There's been a lot of great work said over since this whole Black Lives Matter movement has been going on, but I don't recall the words, the way he put it together, it had that type of impact, and of course he was nearly crying.
Yes.
That had a lot to do with it too. So, but yeah, that was a very impactful statement on his part.
So we'll just tell the audience what's been happening because I know you know. So the Milwaukee Bucks decided not to play. Again, Kenosha, Wisconsin, if you don't know, is literally 40 miles due south from Milwaukee. It's right off of I-94. And certainly the Bucks players must have felt some more obligation than anyone else. They decided not to play. They were playing Orlando. That game didn't happen. The two other games later, Rockets OKC, Lakers Portland, those games were canceled. And that led to almost an immediate domino effect. The WNBA canceled their games. A few baseball games, including the Milwaukee Brewers, canceled a couple of other games. MLS, even Major League Soccer,
Right.
5 out of 6 games were canceled. I know in the National Hockey League, they had a couple of minor protests, no cancellations, which is interesting. They're up in Canada, and as you know, that's largely, frankly, a white sport. But, I think a lot happened just because of that activity. Now, today, it was announced, they had a meeting this morning, the players, and the owners had their own phone call with Adam Silver, the commissioner, who, seems to be down with the program, for lack of a better term. But give me your sense of the whole thing. Now, this has led to cancellations as we tape this. We know there will be no games today, Thursday. There were no games Wednesday. But apparently there's going to be a return. We just don't know when. It might be as soon as tomorrow. But give me your thoughts on the not playing of games, the great support they had. I know you were telling me about what the WNBA did, which you can elaborate on. Right. But no games yesterday, no NBA playoff games today, which is a very big statement, especially in this COVID bubble world we're living in. But give me your thoughts on how everybody seemed to kind of come together once this started.
I think the first thing that came to my mind when I heard about it was, okay, you had this, and you kind of knew that even though the word was that Orlando was actually warming up,
Right.
So they didn't even know. Then when Milwaukee decided to walk off, and then it was like a trickle-down effect. But I think it was sort of like a downward pressure immediately because now the teams, all played different days. So the teams that would have played today wouldn't have played yesterday.
Right.
And so you kind of knew that something would have happened as the way it did, whereas it determined that they're not going to play today. And so that would have encompassed everybody that was in there. I thought some of the interesting things I heard was regarding, I don't know, it was Memphis or one of the teams that was considering not playing well so that they can just get out of it and start doing their protest. I thought that was interesting, but I think it also says a lot about the strong feelings that the athletes are having. I mean, it's not unusual for athletes to take up social conscious issues. You had, the John Carlos thing is one of the things that people talk a lot about, and I think it was '68 Olympics. And then of course you have Muhammad Ali when he didn't want to go to the draft for the Vietnam War, a conscientious objector.
Yep.
And so it's not new. I just think the difference is that I think Mike Tirico put it best. Muhammad Ali didn't have Facebook. and he didn't have likes, and he didn't have, it would have been interesting because he went through a lot for doing what he did.
Correct.
Whereas nowadays, when these guys, they have followers, they have Twitter followers, they have Facebook followers, and so the impact is almost immediate, and it could be lasting. So it's going to be interesting to see going forward from here on in how it goes.
Well, what was very interesting to me is apparently the reports last night and even this morning were last night, the Lakers and the Clippers, who, if you ask me, I think they're the two probably favorites. I think if that's the finals in the West, whoever wins that is going to be the champion.
Right.
That's just my opinion. But supposedly the Lakers and the Clippers voted. Apparently LeBron was really upset that the Bucks, not that they did it, but that they did it without notifying anybody.
Right.
And apparently the Lakers and the Clippers as teams voted to just leave, to not play anymore, which again was surprising to me. But then when they left the meeting, every other team in the room voted to stay. So clearly they had more meetings last night. As you know, they had a meeting at 11 a.m. this morning. At 12 noon, I saw Woj on ESPN, who knows everything, saying there's no games today. The players will resume. It might be tomorrow, Friday, August 28th, but we're not sure, et cetera, et cetera. And I think you're right, the way you described it. If teams don't play tomorrow, then teams aren't going to play the next day either, because it comes in a group of 2 days, 2 days at a time. Now, I did hear Charles Barkley, who, you know, can be serious, always entertaining, but can be serious. And when they finally went back to him last night after Kenny Smith had left the TNT coverage, there was no coverage really. They talked about it for a while. But I heard Barkley say, and this is a quote, he said, quote, "It's exhausting to be black."
It is.
And I think, you know, white people don't quite get that. Even the understanding white people, I don't think quite understand. You know, you hear mothers all the time, I have to have this conversation with my kids. If you get pulled over, you better act this way. And it is true. I think Barkley might have said this as well. Or maybe it was Doc, I think it was Doc Rivers actually, who said, you know, no white person has to talk to their kids and tell them how to act when they get pulled over. So maybe you can comment on what Barkley said a little and expand on that a little, because it is true, no matter how, and in this movement, going back to Mr. Floyd, of course, in Minneapolis, there are now a lot more white people on board now, if you will. But still, no matter how good they are, they'll never know the feeling. So why don't you expound on that a little, because it's obviously something that someone like me can see, but doesn't remotely understand the inner fear factor, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, I think the exhaustion is, you know, obviously it could be physical when it talks about being followed by a police officer or whatever, but it also is mostly emotional, because it could be emotional, obviously, for the person itself. It could be emotional for the parents of African-American kids. I for one, I've been fortunate enough to have gone away to school where I got a great education, but the school was mostly white. I would say probably 60% white, 30% black and brown, and what have you. And I guess this Black Lives Movement, this whole situation has gotten me to a point where I am more understanding, as it's not going to take, and I think that's what Barkley says a lot, as well as Shaquille O'Neal, that it's not going to take just the African-American community to do this. It's going to take all of us. And I think that's the thrust here. That's what LeBron James is saying. That's what a lot of these athletes are saying, that it's going to take all of us. And I think that's a change. I think that's a change from when I was growing up. I mean, I grew up in the Black Panther time when I lived in Crown Heights, and it was that sense that it was just us, you know. But no, I think people come to the conclusion that if this is going to happen, it was a great feeling to take my daughter Natalie down to the march down in 42nd Street, and when I got there, amazingly. And I say amazingly because I expected to see a whole bunch of black folks, but it was more white folks than there were black and brown. And that was a great feeling. And being able to, the sea of people to walk down, I think it was 7th Avenue or 6th Avenue, where it was just amazing. It was a great feeling. And you hope that translates around the rest of the country. We never really know, because we all live in our own fishbowl, but that's the hope I have. I hope that feeling translates all over. And I could see where Doc Rivers feels the same way, in the sense that, hey, listen, you know, yeah, we've loved our country, they don't love us back. But I don't think he says that in a way that we just want to be to ourselves. I think he says it to be more inclusive.
Sure.
And so I think that's the hope, that's the dream, and I think the athletes are doing a hell of a job of putting it out there.
The other thing I wanted to talk briefly about, and I'm sure you saw this, the Bucks came out as a team when they decided not to play anymore, and they had Sterling Brown and George Hill read a statement from the Bucks. Now, a lot of people don't know, I'm sure you do, that Sterling Brown in early 2018 as a rookie for the Bucks pulled into a Walgreens parking lot at 2 in the morning, parked over 2 spaces, ran into Walgreens to get something, came back out, and by then there were like 3 cops and a couple of cop cars, and they were surrounding his building, and you can go see the video even to this day. At the beginning, I think he didn't say who he was from a fame perspective. Maybe he didn't want to play that card, but eventually he was tased. I mean, it was just so stupid. And again, I watched the video yesterday again. And by the way, they to bring the case into 2020, because they wound up correctly suing police department, Milwaukee, and they offered him $400,000 to go away. He's like a professional basketball player. He's like, I don't want the money. And even to this day, in 2020, there was a motion before the judge before COVID hit that he did not want to accept that settlement and wanted to have a trial or have them make another offer or something. So I find that interesting. Unfortunately, virtually all cases have been shut down because of COVID, and they haven't been open. So I thought that's one of the reasons Sterling Brown was one of the speakers. And George Hill, who's a very intelligent, thoughtful, well-measured, articulate guy, he came out with a statement in addition to the statement that essentially said, you know, sometimes I don't even feel like being here. There's that whole you're in the bubble. So give me your thoughts on, because now, as they've decided, we don't know exactly when, maybe tomorrow. If it's not tomorrow, then it won't be Saturday either for the scheduling we talked about. But give me your thoughts on the fact that, first, there are a number of players, clearly, including some Clippers and some Lakers, and maybe LeBron himself, who think maybe we should get the heck out of here. As you said, maybe some guys wanted to lose to get out and do something, because whatever we are 2.5 months before the biggest presidential election, certainly of our lifetime, if not maybe for all of the country ever. But give me your thoughts. I thought it was a very telling statement. I thought it was very interesting. They had those 2 guys make the statement. And of course, the Milwaukee owners came out and supported them, as you knew they would. And everybody kind of got in line after the fact, but it really was the Bucks. And again, Kenosha's 40 miles from Milwaukee. You can understand that. But give me your overall thoughts on that whole thing, giving that statement, the guys who gave that statement, and frankly, where do we go from here, to me, would be like the final question, but you can answer that any way you'd like.
Yeah, I think it was reflective. It was a good idea to reflect what those guys had went through and how they felt, especially the Brown situation. That it was like top news for a while there.
Correct.
And as far as where they go from here, I've heard about this initiative for voting that LeBron James and Alvin Kamara from the NFL, New Orleans Saints are doing in black and brown communities, of getting arenas or whatever where people can come and vote. So they seem to have a plan going forward. I know one of the things that Barkley was saying on CNN is that he didn't know what the plan was. I think they have a plan. They have a plan to try to be impactful as much as they can. Now, in terms of playing the game, I think they will play the game, and I wouldn't blame them for it. But there's things that, you can do. What the WNBA, the ladies did was amazing.
Yeah, tell us about that.
Well, they had the shirts on, and in the back of the white shirts, they had 7 red marks. And what they were going to do was, at every time, I think if it went to the 7-minute mark, whatever, they would put the ball down, and then they would take the 24-second violation. Then the other team would do it, so there's no unfair advantage. There's ways you can do things that let people know. But I think after the George Floyd situation, after what Colin Kaepernick did for almost 4 years ago, I think there's a sense with athletes that maybe it's not enough. Maybe they need to do more. I don't know if getting out of those games, or the leagues or the playoffs altogether, is the way, but I'm sure that somebody will come up with a way to make that impact, similar to what LeBron and Alvin Kamara are doing as far as voting is concerned.
And the 7 red marks, of course, were to represent the 7 shots that Mr. Blake was shot in the back with, which, again, when you see the video, You know, I can remember vividly the Rodney King video, and I was mortified, but it was a different world back then, frankly.
Yeah.
Those guys essentially got off. Breonna Taylor, nobody's still been charged, and she got shot in her house.
Right. And talk about
So-
exhaustion. I mean, if those, I didn't watch the RNC, the National Convention, but I did see the excerpts from the Attorney General from Kentucky. And exhaustion from African American is listening to him talk about, oh, I don't have chains, Biden, I don't have all these things. But meanwhile, the question is, what are you going to do with Breonna Taylor? And you're not doing anything.
Yeah, it was a little weird. I thought that they would put the guy from Kentucky.
Yeah.
Because right now that's the biggest hole.
Right.
I mean, there are a bunch of holes, but that's the biggest hole in the country.
Right.
That and look, it's Kentucky. I've unfortunately spent some time down there, and it's a different country. You know, we live in New York, obviously, and you go down there, it's just a totally different world.
Jim Bouton area.
Yeah, it's. But I think something's got to come of that, because again, these guys are putting on a lot of pressure. LeBron correctly said, you know, we need the owners to get involved, because the NBA owners seem to be a little, I don't want to say better politically, but for example, the NFL owners, there's a lot of Trump supporters there,
Right.
and they donated to his inauguration,
Right.
and their teams are 70-80% African American, and you just got to wonder what these guys are thinking. But invariably, this is no defense, there are a bunch of old white guys who grew up in a different time, and they're not quite down with the program yet. But hopefully LeBron and the other players can get their way and get the owners more involved, because A, these guys are gazillionaires,
Right.
and B, they're old white guys, so they got a power structure that a lot of these guys, you know, you got a guy like Jordan, who part owner of the Wizards, you got a guy like Jeter, who's part owner of the Marlins, but that's just the beginning of a 10 or 20 or 30 year whatever. A-Rod trying to get a piece of the Mets, that's a very slow thing.
Right. Yeah.
So that's going to take a long time.
I do think that that's going to be the next level. I think where interest from the public is going to be about what the NFL players are going to do with everything that's surrounded about them kneeling and not kneeling, and you know, some of the like the Pittsburgh Steelers were in the walkway. They didn't go on the field. What are the NFL players going to do? That's going to be a really interesting thing. I know I'm a Cowboy fan, but I've been very disappointed. We have not heard anything from Jerry Jones on this. I know he suckered them in. That's my opinion. He suckered them into that walking out and kneeling and stuff like that, but not doing. But now you're hearing people. They just acquired Terry Poe from the as a free agent, and he's already saying he's going to kneel. I think that's going to be the next flashpoint. What is the NFL and then the NFL players going to do about that?
I think you'll see a lot of NFL players. I don't know how many Cowboys, though. You bring up a good point, because I'm guessing Jerry Jones is a strong Trump supporter.
Right.
Don't know for sure. But again, the other thing I wanted to say about LeBron and all this voting stuff, and give him credit, he's got that school in Akron, I think, where he grew up, which is just incredible. And the voting thing as well. But I heard they were using, like, I don't know if it was Dodger Stadium or the Staples Center. And that's great. But here's the problem to me. And he may be doing this. I hope he is doing this in Ohio. California, if you vote in California, you know, Biden's going to win. We live in New York. Biden's going to win. I'm not saying our votes don't mean anything, but they don't mean a lot. As, give you an example, my son went to college in Ohio, and he was a labor union organizer in Cleveland. He was in Ohio for 5 years. Every year he registered. He's from New York. Every year he registered to vote in Ohio. Pretty smart. And that's what a lot of college kids do. But I hope LeBron is doing the same thing in Akron or Cleveland, which is not too far from Akron, because part of the problem in 2016, I understand Hillary was a flawed candidate, but part of the problem was the African-American vote didn't come out like they did for Obama in 2008 and 12. But I think they have to be, you know, Kenosha is the 4th largest city in Wisconsin, and they might be the population of Kenosha, which from what I've seen is largely African-American. They might be the deciding factor in Wisconsin.
Yeah,
and Wisconsin is one of those states.
Those states, exactly. I think Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. So it would be interesting to see, based on what you're saying, like in Michigan, do you go to the Ford Center and try to get that to be a place where in Wisconsin, do you go to, I don't know what the name of where in Milwaukee, and I don't think Milwaukee would be a biggest issue. I think the thing for the Biden party, or the Democratic Party, is that they saw that Hillary got only I think Barack Obama got 71% of the black vote. She got 47%. That makes a huge difference.
Especially in those states.
So,
right.
so finding some place in the Wisconsins, and not so much in the Philadelphia. I mean, not so worried about Philadelphia, but maybe in the Harrisburg area, in that area where you could find some place that people can come to and get their vote in. Because I don't think you have to worry so much about Pittsburgh. I don't think you have to worry. But there are those places like Harrisburg that have a lot of African Americans, and Lancaster and York. So it's going to be interesting. I agree with you. I think it's going to be interesting how they're going to be able to strategize that to try to maximize that vote.
So I will say for myself, I'm glad they did this. I'm behind it totally, but I'm glad they're coming back as well as a basketball fan, among other things. But also, I think they've made a really good, strong point. Look, the whole country's talking about this today.
Country.
And a lot of these other sports got in line as well. You have to be thankful for that. So I'm glad they're coming back. Give me your final thoughts, Coach, and we'll wrap this up.
Well, again, like I said, I've started to really get to the point where it really has to be all of us, and not just by words. You have to really believe it has to be all of us. There's also, like a person once told me, there's a simple math here. As African Americans, we're the third largest population now. We're not the second like it used to be. I think Hispanics have now passed us. So it is a black and brown thing as well.
Yep.
But it's also, yes, you cannot. I don't know if you can really expect anyone who's black and brown to be able to enjoy the essence of the country, which is supposed to be founded on liberty for all and equality, and not have everyone a part of it. If it's going to be just a fraction, 50% or 55%, you're going to always have that issue. There's got to be a way to have those conversations that's going to be difficult to have. They're going to be difficult, but you have to have them. And if we can just get over that hump, I think we can get there, but it's going to have to take all of us.
Very well said, Coach. This is Steve Kallas, speaking of sports, along with Coach Dwayne Murray. We'll see you the next time.